Flo is here because she's digesting what the papers are saying about the migrant camp, Flo.
That's right. Continues to be a top story today. Le Parisien reports about Adieu la jungle, reports that the dismantling of the camp has begun in a very calm way, describes how some of these migrants are heading off to their new destiny without looking back, while others are more sentimental. A quote from a Sudanese migrant: "The only home I have is this jungle. Even if the living conditions are terrible, this is where animals should be living, not humans. And yet this refugee is very reluctant to leave the camp." So a very interesting article here in Aujourd'hui en France, Le Parisien. Libération as well has an hour-by-hour account of the events yesterday. The jungle is emptying out before being demolished. Between 6,500 and 8,000 people living in this shanty town will now be relocated in 450 welcome centers across the country. You might have seen that little map in Le Parisien where you can see where all these welcome centers are. What's interesting, though, is NGOs are warning that many of these migrants might actually make their way back to Calais.
Now, the government, of course, Flo, is describing it as a humanitarian organisation, but there's also quite a lot of criticism, isn't there, for imposing these migrants on towns and communities right around the country.
That's right. Le Figaro reports that the way that these migrants have been distributed across the country is really a burning topic, and what's being called the Cazeneuve plan, because Bernard Cazeneuve is the interior minister who came up with this plan. Well, it's really been the cause of a lot of doubts and fears, according to Le Figaro, and it's been criticized for its lack of transparency. And you can read about it here. They're talking about Le Figaro says, especially criticism coming from the right, of course, saying that the government has been kind of blackmailing local mayors and not going through regional authorities. Regional authorities, for instance, say they weren't aware about exactly which towns were concerned, even though these regional authorities are in charge of things like education and transport. So they're kind of shocked that they weren't aware of what this plan was going to be. All this is contributing to tensions around these welcome centers where these migrants are going to be relocated. There are reports, for instance, that one of these welcome centers in the Auvergne region was set on fire yesterday.
OK, let's move on to another big story in the press today. This is Belgium's announcement that it will not support a trade deal between the European Union and Canada after one of its regions, Wallonia, continued to block this pact, Flo.
That's right. Now, this has upset a lot of people, of course, in Canada and in the EU. But Libération, the left-leaning paper, takes a look at those that are thrilled by this news, this David versus Goliath scenario. Wallonia has made a lot of people in Europe happy. It's given hope to a lot of people, whether it's the citizens' movement Podemos in Spain. You also have the left-wing Syriza, a party in Greece that we've also talked a lot about, but also smaller movements in Germany and even in Denmark. These movements that have been very much against the CETA, saying that it is only going to be benefiting big businesses and not European citizens.
A lot of other papers, though, are very eager to save it, aren't they? You put out a piece from the business paper L'Opinion.
That's right. What's interesting about L'Opinion is it's a pro-business paper and a pro-Europe paper. So it's interesting to see what they have to say about this. They wonder, is there a chance to save CETA after Wallonia's vote? And what's interesting is L'Opinion says that the EU is actually partially to blame for this. They haven't actually been very transparent with EU citizens. They haven't educated them as to what the benefits of CETA is. If the Euro Union wants to convince citizens of the advantages of free trade, well, it needs to break it down for them and explain it to them. And it also needs to harden its business policy, because for now, if people don't understand how it's going to benefit them, why are they going to be in favor of it?
OK, well, let's move on to French politics now. Papers looking ahead to the 2017 presidential election. Who is going to run on the left? Who's going to run on the right? It's all very complicated, isn't it?
That's right. Now, Libération looks at one potential candidate on the left. That's the former Justice Minister, Christiane Taubira. You might be familiar with her. You can see her here riding her bicycle. Apparently, she loves to ride her bicycle. This is actually a photo of her riding away from the government the day she left back in January. Could she be the spare tire that's going to save the left? You can see this pun here in Libération. Well, she's very popular in the left, and according to Libé, behind the scenes, several socialist members of parliament have been holding meetings with her and are trying to convince her to run for president.
Hang on a minute, Flo. What about François-Hollande? I mean, he still hasn't said, has he, the current socialist president, whether he's going to stand or not at the moment.
That's why, will he or won't he? What's certain, though, is that Hollande has really confused a lot of people, because you might remember earlier this month, a book came out of an interviews that he'd held with Le Monde journalists. The book was called A President Shouldn't Say These Kind of Things. And, well, he did say some things that upset a lot of people. In fact, a lot of people felt insulted by some of the things he said in this book. Le Figaro, rather, says, look, he's in a very critical situation. He's very low in opinion polls. People have been confused by this book, and yet the president isn't changing anything. He's holding his strategy, his media strategy. Wonder if that'll work.
We shall see. Now, another politician who's been shocking everyone is over one of these. It's back. You may have noticed.
Back.
It's back. Go on.
Are we going to be able to eat this, though?
You can have some if you want. I might have to buy another one for later on.
This is pain chocolat, of course, one of the most delicious things to come out of France. Well, this is Jean-Francois who is running in the primary for Les Républicains, the opposition party. Well, yesterday he had what you might call a Marie Antoinette moment. He was asked by a viewer of the radio station Europe 1 if he knew the price of a pain au chocolat. He admitted, I have no idea. I think it must be around 10 or 15 centimes. Well, that is very wrong. Because
very wrong. I wish I could get one for that
Exactly.
price.
They're about 10 times as much as that, if you're lucky. So you can see here, it's getting a lot of attention. He drew a lot of mockery, I must say, on social media. 20 Minutes has a clever front page today. Des politiques coupés des réalités. Politicians that are cut off from reality, but you can see they've played on words with his name there. The Huffington Post, ironically, comes to his defense, saying he's not completely wrong. I see you taking a little nibble there, Stuart.
Well, why not?
They say, look, if you buy a big bag of 10 cheap pain au chocolats from a discount retailer, well, then yes, it might cost 15 cents each. But those are certainly not the kind of pain au chocolat that Copé will be eating, I'm sure.